Recording. Thank you, ma'am. So we're gonna record this, and then after this presentation, it's gonna take a little while for it to kind of load, and then I'll send you guys in an email this recording, so you can watch it later and download it if you want to. And then I'll also send you the PDF of the PowerPoint that I'm gonna go through. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. I'm gonna like open up our PowerPoint here. Not that page, this page. All right, can you guys give me a thumbs up that you can see it? Get it loaded, okay? Good deal. All right, so this presentation is all about being a good guide. I might call you a guide or a hike leader or interpreter. All these things essentially mean the same thing, the way I'm describing it here. We've got Lisa here, okay? But essentially, you guys are going to be a guide for our Lake Creek Preserve nature hikes. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later and kind of what that means and what that's going to look like, the program itself. But for right now, we're going to jump into what being a guide means and how to be a good guide. So just a little background information about myself. I have a background in animal science and ecology. For Heartwood, I've been with Heartwood for 7 years now, going on 7 years, I guess. So since 2016, and I'm the secretary. I'm also in charge of the Junior Master Naturalist program, which just started a couple weeks ago, and it's awesome. And I also, most of my volunteering hours I get from rehabbing wildlife at Friends of Texas Wildlife, but I also do hikes at the Girl Scout camps in the Conroe area. So I get Girl Scout troops go out there and I show them around the forest. I also, this last year, was able to get my certified interpretive guide certification through the National Association for Interpretation, I believe is what it is. I have a pin for it. It's legit, I promise. I have a certificate. So it was great, and it's a great program. A lot of the stuff that I'm going to tell you guys about today on how to be a guide kind of stems from that in a way, but with my own little spin on it. So here's kind of an overview of what we're going to talk about the purpose, why you guys are doing this, working on creating a program just like for yourself, how that might look, steps to follow during the program, kind of walking through what to do when you have a group of hikers with you and you're like, okay, now what? I'm going to give you guys some resources, and during that time, I'm going to show you guys the website that may help you kind of guide you guys on our hikes. And then we're going to play a little game. So we have enough time. So I'm going to keep an eye on the clock too. Keep it. I want to be cognizant of y'all's time. Okay, so to start with, what is interpretation? So it is something, I'm not going to read that out to you guys. I'm not a PowerPoint reader, but it is something that connects your audience to the resource. When I say resource, I'm talking about the area, the hiking trail or the preserve, in this case, Lake Creek Preserve. So when we say interpretation or interpreter, a lot of times we think of people who are interpreting languages. And you guys are kind of doing that. You're interpreting the language of the natural world for people who may or may not have experience in that natural world. So if you think about it that way, that has helped me a lot, be thinking about being an interpreter and not just a guide. When I think of a guide, I think of like when you go to a museum and there's a lady with like a big flag and she's like, follow the flag, and you walk around the museum and she shows you this and this and she just says facts about stuff. That's great, but I can just read a book and learn all of that stuff, right? As an interpreter, you're not only interpreting the words, you're also interpreting feelings for people. You're trying to connect them emotionally to the area. So with that, keep in mind, information is not interpretation. You are not a museum. You are not a book. You are not assigned in a museum. You are a person. You're a human being, and we want human emotions to come out of you guys. The more passionate you are, the more excited you are about this, the more passionate, excited people are in connecting with that resource and with that area. People will care about something and then take the next step to care for it. Make sure I'm not missing any of my notes here. A quick note on feeling afraid of being wrong. I don't want you to feel afraid of not knowing something. If you don't know something, that's okay. I say I don't know a lot, and I'm going to give you guys like a little tip. When you say I don't know, it sparks curiosity in a way that a lot of other things don't for people, because they feel like they've stumped the expert, and it gives them that little bit of spark that they want to go and learn more. So sometimes saying I don't know is a really great way for people to learn more on their own, for them to take that next step. Now, that being said, we can't say I don't know all the time, right? So know your limits, but people come up with really great questions and you end up learning a lot on your own. But if you pass on incorrect information to people, you may be doing more harm than good. Because if people either find out that what you said was wrong, they may question everything else that you said, or they might pass on that information to somebody else, the wrong information to somebody else, and that can be compounding dangerously, right? We can give the wrong information in a dangerous way. So I want to be cautious of that, but be confident in saying, I don't know. Practice saying, I don't know. It's great. It's very powerful. All right. This is kind of what I said a minute ago. The goal is to make people care. Through that knowledge, we have the power to make better choices. And I say this to kids all the time. It's the cheesiest thing you hear in your life, but knowledge is power, right? With knowledge, we have the power to make good choices. So that's what you guys are doing. You're making that connection for people. Now, when you're creating kind of your own personal style, these are the parts of the interpretive hike which you would strive to include. So our guiding basics are erotic. Now, before you hold on a second, let's talk about what erotic means. It's just an acronym. Enjoyable, relevant, organized, thematic, involving, and creative. I don't expect you guys to memorize this and keep it on in your pocket or whatever all the time, but just kind of something to keep in the background of your brain, subconsciously, things you need to be thinking about. So we're going to go through each of these. So first of all, enjoyable. This is something that sticks with you, right? This is the feeling that sticks with you. If it's enjoyable, that's what you're going to remember. You may not necessarily remember facts about things, but you're going to remember the feeling you had when you were walking through that museum. Maybe it was a really enjoyable experience for you, right? So I want you guys to kind of tell me, let me see if I can open up the chat here, because I'm curious to see what you guys have to say. Who inspired you to do what you love? So oftentimes we have these kinds of personal connections with people who did something that was enjoyable and you remember it, right? So who are those people for you? And I'll tell you who they are for me in a minute, but just curious. It may be somebody you know personally or not. Think about things that maybe people who inspired you guys to become master naturalists or do your job. You know, maybe you have a job that you really enjoy.
Yeah, can it be like in any endeavor?
Yeah, anywhere. Okay. Somebody who inspired you to do something that you love to do. A birder. Carolyn Longanay says her dad. That's my answer too. That's why you guys are thinking. This is not a test. You can just type whatever you're feeling. Fishing and hiking with my dad. Dad's come up a lot. Master naturalist experiences are new because of Carolyn Worsham. Oh, that's a nice little shout out, Darla. A bicycle club. Okay. Man, dads are inspirational in the outdoors, huh? So for me, it was my dad. He never discouraged me from hitting up those mud puddles. So I always really enjoyed being outside. There was one time when we were hiking with a camping trip, and we were on this trail, and suddenly kind of the trail kind of petered out in a way. And instead of panicking, I remember my dad saying something like, hey, let's climb to the top of that hill and just see if we can see the campsite from there. And it didn't hit me at the time that we were lost. It was only years later that I was recalling that story or that occurrence, that event, that I was like, oh, my dad had no idea where we were. So those kinds of experiences have really stuck with me. Great authors. Yeah, definitely. When you read something that's really impactful, for sure. So it may be somebody personal. A lot of times it is for a lot of people. It may also be somebody who was just really enthusiastic and you just love to watch, maybe, pure enjoyment. I mean, how can you not love Steve Irwin? He's positively influenced so many people just to be curious about stuff, right? Just to be curious and not as afraid of things, even though he's handling these like venomous snakes and alligators and stuff. We also have, for me, the Kratz brothers, and they have a show now. It's a cartoon. And I'm going to tell you guys this, when I teach kids, so my job is mostly teaching kids in schools about wildlife. When I teach kids who watch the Kratz brothers regularly, they are pros at this stuff. They are so good at nailing the natural world and kind of understanding all of the different balances and interrelationships and everything that goes on in our ecosystems. I don't know what it is about how they do it, but they do a great job. But this is the show that I watched. It was Zaboomafoo with the little lemur. It may also be somebody who maybe wasn't a personality. Like Jane Goodall is not necessarily a TV personality, but her passion really speaks to people, right? It translates into a lot of different languages, including chimp language. So it's definitely something that's any of these people can inspire you and inspire people. So when we think about these kinds of things, these experiences that we've had with people in personal relationships or otherwise, one of the biggest things that will stick out to us is if you enjoyed it, right? So we got to be enjoyable. So be enjoyable. Relevant. So moving on in our erotic acronym. So relevant, we have to make it relevant to the audience. We'll talk about knowing your audience and being aware of them in a little bit. But I love this quote on the bottom from the National Park Service. People will only care for what they first care about. And I've touched on that a little bit already, but by making it relevant to them, we're helping them make that connection. We're helping them make the connection from the fact, the thing that they're learning, to a way that they can use it. So for example, when I'm taking a hike, when I'm taking Girl Scouts on hikes, I like to point out things that may not necessarily be the most beautiful things. Like I like looking at dead logs. I like looking at the fungus and the mosses on things. And I say that these are really important parts of this ecosystem. It's not the biggest, flashiest thing, but it is an important part of our ecosystem. So to make this connect to people when they go back home, where they're still thinking about it, I talk about the role that these organisms play. So the dead stuff decomposes, becomes part of the soil. And this is true not just for big old trees, but also for like leaf litter, right? In the fall, growing up, we used to rake up the leaves and put them in big paper bags, and then the dump truck would come take them. And that doesn't really make any sense to me, because all that stuff can decompose and become part of the soil and make things healthier. So by knowing this stuff that we're learning here in this place in a translatable way to something that I can use, you're making that information relevant to them, personal and meaningful. A lot of times our volunteer opportunities are as interpreters, as master naturalists, are with other master naturalists. So you'll want to speak with them on their level. For these hikes, we may get a lot of families, including kids. So we'll need to speak to them on their level. We need to make sure that it's relevant, not in an academic way necessarily, but something that, again, they're going to be able to use when they go home, something that they're going to never look at a pine tree the same way again. We want them to have those kinds of feelings that they can take home with them. Organization. So being organized is really important. I was telling Carolyn Longlinay a few weeks ago that one of my favorite stores, like in a weird way, is the Container Store, because I love organizing stuff because it makes sense, right? When things are in an organized fashion, it helps us to see things clearer and know things and understand things a little bit better. When we look at move here, looking at my notes. When we look at the organization of a hike, we need to think about things in the way that you might think of like an essay. So we have an introduction, the body, and the conclusion. Which of those things would you say is the most important? Again, there's no right answer, but how do you feel when you come to if you've gone to a hike or something, what is the thing that kind of sticks out to you most as maybe the most important thing? Introduction, body, or conclusion? Body, introduction, intro. There is something to be said about like the first impressions are the most important, right? And for me, I would say the introduction is a little bit more important just because of those kinds of first impressions are important. But all these parts are important. I can't take away from the importance of any of these parts. Let's say, for example, you're making orange juice. You first need an orange. So you introduce an orange to the audience, and you might give some background information on the oranges or something. And then for our body, that's like when you squeeze the orange to make that orange juice. You're squeezing it out. You're creating the bulk or the pulp of the presentation. And then finally, you might give that orange juice to somebody to then drink and enjoy. So you're showing them how to experience the literal fruits of your labor, right? So all these things are really important in kind of creating an organized hike. So we'll talk more. I'm going to focus a little bit more maybe on the introduction. The body is going to be a lot of content, and I'm not going to tell you what to say today. We'll talk more about that on Saturday. This is more about getting you guys comfortable with being a leader, not necessarily the actual content that you have to say, if that makes sense. All right, so topic and theme. Topic and theme are two different things. And if you have ever written a master's thesis or something like that, you know, those are two different things and they have to be written out separately, but they are related. Our topic would be the focus of the program. And then the theme is going to answer the question about your topic, so what? So your topic is something kind of a broad category, but then your theme is going to be able to kind of, again, make that connection between the fact and the relevance, making it relevant to our audience. For example, for these Lake Creek hikes, we might have the topic native wildlife, and our theme might be the economic importance of endangered species. And maybe that's for a group of master naturalists that wants to come on a hike. Or maybe for a family-oriented hike, we could have the same topic, native wildlife, but the theme might be something like animal clues, where you go out and you're looking for evidence of animals with tracks or feathers or fur, or whatever you find on the ground, smells, whatever you find on the ground. So to be clear, you may never say these things out loud to anybody else. You don't have to, but your audience may never know what the topic and the theme really are other than nature hike. And that's okay. But you having this kind of stuff in your head and in your heart, you're able to, again, create that organization that helps to make things tie all together. Involving and creative. These are big parts of any hike that I do. I want to make sure that people are involved physically with nature. Nature is not a museum with ropes keeping us from touching stuff. We have to know what is safe to touch, of course, but this involving part of our hike is really important. We have to make sure that the activities are engaging and that we keep the vocabulary easy to understand. This can be tough with a mixed group, but I'm gonna give you guys like a little hint, something that I do with if I get a group of first graders and fifth graders at the same time. And you know that there's a big gap in vocabulary between those two age groups. what I do is if I say a vocabulary word that I think is a little low for our first graders, or sorry, a little high for our first graders, they may not know it. I define it without saying out loud, do you know what that means? Does anybody know what that means? Or even worse, does anybody not know what that means? Have you guys ever been in a presentation and somebody says a word and they go, does anybody not know what that means? And everyone's like afraid to say they don't know what it means because they're like, I want to be smart. I don't want to admit that I don't know what it means. Don't ask people if they know what it means. Just define it. Just easily do it. So something like if I say, all animals in this habitat, in this place where things live, they need food, water, shelter, and space, right? So you hear me say the word, and then I define what it is pretty simply. I want to make sure that everybody's on the same page, but I'm using a vocabulary word that doesn't dumb it down, because then I can then use that word later on and know that they know what it means. When in doubt, be more informal. And this is a big one. Be more informal when in doubt. If there are technical questions, feel free to answer technical questions with technical answers if you have it prepared. Otherwise, most of the time with family groups or with kids, especially, as long as it's fun and engaging and creative and interactive, that stuff is really all that matters. Again, that feeling that you're giving your audience of enjoyment of being outdoors. And we're going to talk a little bit more about kind of programs with kids, because this is something that I have found in our Master Naturalist group. A lot of people have said that they've felt a little uncomfortable or not really sure what to do with groups of kids. So a few things that we need to keep in mind when we have groups of kids and even, family groups is we want to make sure that this information includes elements that help them develop in some ways their cognitive abilities, social emotional skills, physical skills, and communication and language abilities. So there's a lot to handle there, right? And you guys are not responsible for the raising of these kids, just to be clear, but just some things to keep in mind. These are ways that you can make it engaging, right? Our cognitive abilities by integrating problem solving, asking questions, things like that to get the kids thinking for themselves. You're not just giving them information, you're asking them to contribute. Those things are helping cognitive ability. Social emotional skills, so group activities are great. I'll give you guys some examples of that here in a second. Physical skills, so whole body movement. Obviously, we're going on a walk, so we're physically moving. But some things like when I take Girl Scouts on hikes at Misty Meadows, there's a part on the trail that has a live oak tree, or it's a water oak, but it's alive, but it's at an angle that makes it really easy to climb. And I encourage the kids to climb it. So I do that by teaching them how to safely do it. So I'm introducing them to something that they may have never done before. Some of them have, some of them haven't. Some of them are uncomfortable with doing it, but in a safe way. And then communication, language abilities. This means don't do all the talking. Ask them questions. You're not a video that they're watching. You are not a sign, a placard on the wall. You are engaging with them. So ask them questions. It's the biggest thing I get feedback from when you ask a question. Even if you don't know the answer and you're asking a question, it gets that curiosity going, right? There's a quote from Benjamin Franklin I really love. Tell me and I forget. Teach me and I remember. Involve me and I learn. All right. We'll pause here in just a minute for any comments or questions. So hold on to that in just a minute. Programs for kids, a few other kind of things here. Use a space that's conducive to activity and movement. I'll show you guys a few places where we might do that on our Lake Creek Trail. But kind of be aware of the space is a really big thing. Provide hands-on materials. So this might mean bringing something with you. I like to have a magnifying glass with me. Sometimes I bring binoculars. Maybe if the kids have never used binoculars before, it can be really exciting. But a lot of times the forest provides for us that kind of stuff, right? That there's a fuzzy moss that I love to touch and I get the kids to touch and they love it. Leaves, we like leaves, acorns, the spiky, the gum, what is it called? Sweet gum tree. Yeah, those little spiky balls. Yeah, we love all that kind of stuff. Engage their senses. So maybe not taste, but sight, touch, smell, hearing, might hear some birds, all of those things, kind of keep that in mind as we go along. And this is great for kids, but it's also awesome for adults too. Adults love this stuff. Use tone and language that is appropriate for their age level. I talked about this a little bit already, but again, make sure that that vocabulary, even if you do want to use a higher level vocabulary word, make it easy for them to understand. And then have a management plan in place for behavior issues. So if you guys have any questions about this, we can talk more about this in detail later on. But this means kind of involving the adults. For me, especially when I'm on the Girl Scout hikes, when we first start out, a lot of times the adults kind of stand in the back and they just talk amongst themselves. And it makes it really difficult for the kids to feel that they're involved because they're like, hey, I don't have to listen. The adults aren't listening. That's, whatever. So I engage the adults I give them a job. Basically, I'm like, hey, Susan, I need you to kind of be in the middle of the pack, make sure that we're all doing safe things. And Tina, I need you in the back to make sure that nobody gets lost. Make sure we don't lose any hikers this time. Let's see. So it is helpful to kind of know their names and be on a familiar level with them in that sense. We'll talk more about that later. Ideally, I'm kind of putting a note here. Ideally, on my hikes, we start with play. We have some form of play in the middle, and we have some form of play at the end, kind of a play sandwich, if you will. And this kind of breaks up a lot of that information that you might be giving them into easy sections that kind of are broken up. And what I find on my 2-hour-long hikes with these Girl Scouts is that when I tell them we're going for a 2-hour hike, they go, oh, that's so long. And then we get done and I'm like, how long did you think that took? And they're like, oh, we're finished already? That was only like 30 minutes, right? So by breaking up our hike into kind of play sections, it breaks it up mentally, the time-wise for them. All right, so a few game and activity ideas that I have just to put out there. You don't have to use these, but just a few ideas. Camouflage trail is great. You can use things that you bring and you camouflage, as long as you kind of remember what those things are that you're camouflaging. So in this case, maybe hard to tell, but my friend Autumn here is holding up a bandana, and I camouflaged that bandana by wrapping it around some bright green leaves. But I told them that there were green bandanas. There were 5 of them, or however many there were, and that they had to keep a lookout for them. When they found them, they won a prize and they would win the bandana. It was not exciting, but it was exciting. They totally loved it. But they were like, oh, I just get the bandana. Okay. But then I told them a bunch of ways that they can use the bandana. Then that's way more fun. And then we have micro hike. So a magnifying glass goes a long way. A lot of times with magnifying glasses, you find that you end up staying in one spot a lot of the time, because you can look at things really, really closely and spend a long time just looking at a very small area. So if you ever end up with more time that you need to kind of get rid of, micro hike is a great thing to do. Nothing structured about it, just look at stuff close up. Bingo is always great, or scavenger hunt, things that they need to find as we're walking along. I've never personally used these, but they are kind of a great resource to have just in case. And it does keep them kind of engaged because they have to keep looking around. I would suggest having actual good prizes for these for the winners, and probably something for everybody. But there are plenty of resources out there available with pre-made scavenger hunts or bingo cards for nature. All right, we're gonna pause here for just a second. Feel free to unmute yourself if you guys have any questions or comments so far. I would like to make a comment on something in the chat. Carolyn, I would love to know more about you taking your daughters to meet the Kratz brothers. Is that something?
It was awesome. They came to Louisiana We'd been watching them on PBS. Camille was maybe about 3, and I think I was more starstruck than she was.
Did they have the lemur?
They did not have the lemur. They
That's
did
okay.
not. This was before the lemur. It was when it was the Kratz brothers, is what they were called. It was before Zuboomafoo.
Before Zuboomafoo. Kratz Brothers is after Zuboomafoo. The cartoon is Kratz Brothers. That's new.
Well,
The first thing.
you sure?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because the Kratz brothers used to do it was just them on PBS.
Yeah. Yeah, Kratz Brothers, I think, is on PBS.
Oh, no, you're right. I remember.
I know.
It would have the little, yes, you're right. I remember now. That was 30 years ago.
What?
Yes, Camille's going to be
Imagine
30.
the lemur travels very well.
Yes.
Maybe that's a hindrance there. All right. What else? Does anybody else have any other questions so far on any of the stuff we've talked about or comments? Good. I have the chat open, so if you do think of something, I can always come back to that later. I love this guy's name is Harold, I think, or like our meme, Harold. Yeah. All right, so talking about our introduction, I said that for me, I would consider the introduction a really important part. That's not to say that the body and conclusion aren't really important as well, but for me, I put a lot of importance on the introduction because it really sets up the tone for the rest of the hike. So we're going to go through kind of the things that you really need to make sure to cover, including knowledge of your audience, techniques to use, and handling complications. We'll kind of follow that. So to start off with, if you remember your high school psychology, we talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We have physiological needs, we have safety, belonging, esteem, and self-actualization. I'm going to focus on those first 3. So physiological is physically like our water, food, shelter. Using the restroom is one of those things, especially when we're on hikes. I'm going to tell you guys right now, Lake Creek Preserve does not have restrooms available. So be prepared for that. Ruth, when you're traveling, I would give yourself maybe a few extra minutes to stop at a store and use the restroom if you need to before our hike. So just kind of being aware of that stuff is really important. Making clear the amount of time that you will be spending away from these things is great. People want to be physically prepared for that stuff, right? I think of it this way. If you imagine going to somebody's house, somebody you know, but you've never been to their house before, and you walk in and they say, "Welcome, make yourself at home. I'll be in the kitchen." And they leave you and you kind of feel awkward and you're like, I have no idea what to do with myself. I need to use the restroom. I'm hungry, but should I ask for that? I feel weird about it. Okay, different scenario. You walk into somebody's house, you know them, but you've never been to their house before. And this time they say, "Welcome to our home. Make yourself at home. The restroom is down the hall to the left. I'm going to be in the kitchen if you want to follow me. If you would take your shoes off, please, you can leave them in the closet. You can set your bag down here. In the kitchen, I can get you some water. Would you also like something to eat?" That's taking care of all of our needs, our immediate needs when we get to a place, right? And you feel a lot more comfortable when you get to a place and somebody does that for you. So knowing how to find these kinds of resources is great, and telling people that. And let me say this, there's no such thing as over giving this kind of information. When I'm leading Girl Scout hikes and I have multiple troops on the same hike, what I might do is, one troop comes up and they have, half their troop there, just like one adult. I'm going to tell the adult, "Hey, welcome. We're about to start in about 5 minutes. We're still waiting on 2 more troops. The restrooms are right over here. I won't leave without you guys. So if you need to use a restroom, you can do that." I'm going to check their shoes. I'm going to say, "Okay, are you guys wearing shoes that you don't mind tromping through the mud with?" Because sometimes they end up wearing unicorn shoes and you wouldn't want to mess up the unicorn shoes. Making sure that they know that it's a 2-hour hike. So we're going to be away from the restroom for 2 hours. There are no restrooms besides the green door on this hike. And if you have a snack, you're welcome to bring it, because that'll allow some time for you guys to stop and eat. Make sure that there's water, all that kind of stuff. Take a note of how many are on your hike. I feel like maybe I shouldn't have to say this, but it's good to remember the number just in case anybody happens to wander. Take regular breaks to survey the people in your surroundings. So when you're doing this, kind of be aware of maybe where shelter is, especially in Texas, if it's hot or if it's cold or if it's muddy or whatever. You don't want to stop them when they're in the mud. And on Lake Creek, the hike that we're going to go on, it's muddy a lot. So there are some wooden walkways. And what I'll do is a lot of times, if I do this in my head. I've taken one group out on this trail, but I've walked myself a lot there. So in my mind, I kind of plan how I might do this, but I might get everybody onto the wooden walkway and I look over and I check in the back, the person who's designated to make sure everybody is still there. I'm like, hey, is everyone still good? And then we continue on. Does anybody need a break? That kind of stuff. Make an effort to be personal. And this kind of goes along with our safety and belonging. When you're personal, we'll talk about kind of knowing people's names here in a minute. It helps them to feel more comfortable. And again, kind of more safe, goes together a little bit. Let's see. All right. Learning people's names. So I believe the plan for these hikes, people will sign up in advance. So we should have a list of people's names, at least one person from the group who will be coming, and knowing their name can be really helpful. Pay attention and consciously use their name. A lot of times when we meet people, subconsciously we forget to listen for their name. And all we're doing is practicing in our heads saying our own name. And obviously that's the opposite of helpful, because then they just told you their name, and then you're like, wait, will you repeat that for me? Is when I meet somebody and I say, hi, Carolyn, nice to meet you, after they've introduced themselves to me. I like to say it back to them. Carolyn, it's really nice to meet you. My name is Adrienne. And that helps me solidify it, but it also goes back to being personal and showing them that they're important to the overall hike. If you need to use techniques like association or alliteration or rhyming or relating to somebody that can also be helpful. I will give you a hint though on this. My dog's name is Layla, and I love the name Layla. And I've met some people named Layla, and they don't like hearing that my dog's name is Layla. They don't want to be associated with the dog for some reason. To me, it's the highest compliment, because I love my dog. She's like my best friend. But if you say, I have learned to say, oh, Layla, that's my best friend's name, and they love it. So it helps me remember. Use lists available to you. So you may choose to have the list of names printed out or write them down. Don't be afraid to take notes as they're introducing themselves. So before a hike, I like to kind of go around. Okay, we have little Jenny here and Sally and Amanda. Okay, so I like to, and I'll tell them, I'm not just going to creepily take notes. There's kind of a difference here in how you do it. But I'm gonna say, okay, if you don't mind, I'm gonna take a few little notes here next to your name, just so I can make sure that I can remember you. If anything happens to you, I need to be able to identify the body. And then finally, number 4, don't make excuses. I have a name that is difficult to remember and sometimes difficult to pronounce, and I understand that. And so that helps me a lot when I forget somebody's name or I mispronounce their name. I avoid making excuses for doing so. You don't have to lead with, I'm sorry, I have a horrible memory. Just get to the point. Will you tell me your name again? Just one more time. Thank you. It's not weird. Like for somebody who gets that all the time, it's not weird. If you just cut to the point, sorry, will you tell me your name again? Got it. Ask them directly about it. Attention getting techniques. These can be really important, especially if you have a boisterous group. When everything is going really well, it might get kind of loud and you need to get their attention. So here are a few things we need to keep in mind. Always start with the full attention of the group. only begin speaking when you have the full attention. So if you start speaking and other people are still talking and you just act like they're not talking, it really sets the tone for how you feel about yourself, right? Like, I'm not really that important. I'm going to talk, but what I have to say isn't really, you don't have to listen if you don't want to. And that's not the tone we want to set. We want to make sure people know how to be safe when we're on the trail. So when I'm talking, I need you to listen. So make sure that you have the full attention of the group. If you start talking and people are still talking, there are definitely ways that we can combat that. And it doesn't have to involve yelling to get everybody's attention. You can engage the disruptive guests. So sometimes if you're, especially if like you're in a circle environment, if you walk towards the person who is causing the disruption, they will become more aware of themselves and quiet down. Sometimes if you kind of just put your hand on their shoulder, or another good way, if you remember their name, you can say something like, Darla, you are gonna love this. So I'm gonna ask you to listen up. I know you like birds. I want you guys to listen to this bird. So if you remember their names, it can also be a great way to kind of get that attention back. Use hand gestures or claps. This is stuff I do all the time, especially with kids, but adults like it too. Teenagers, maybe. Teenagers are a big if. But in general, people love it. So a few examples that I have are getting people to be active. And the motion of somebody doing something like this catches people's eye. And then they realize that we're all doing it and we all need to be quiet. So something like, I might ask them to flap their wings like a bat or stand like a flamingo. And you guys can't see me, but like hold one leg, right? So only standing on one leg. I ask them to, grow antlers, do that sometimes. So there are lots of things that you can come up with to kind of do. Claps are great too. When I'm on a hike, I may not use a clap because I want to set the tone that we're not going to be super loud. We want to be voices on the low down a little bit so we can hear other things around us. Leverage your physical environment. This means make sure that you're not below the group where people in the back may not be able to hear you as well. So if you have a high point where everyone can see you and hear you, take advantage of that. Also, a note about the sun. So if you are standing with your back to the sun, that means your audience is looking into the sun and they're spending a lot of their emotional energy not being blinded. So be aware of that. You may have to put yourself in a situation where you're staring into the sun, but it's either you or the audience. So, pick and choose, or just be in a place where maybe there's some shade. So if you're standing in a place where you're open air, it's like 90 degrees and everyone's really hot and the sun is beating down on us because there's a tree like a few meters away, but you stopped them in the sun. That's going to be miserable. And everyone's going to be just not listening to you. They're going to be thinking about that tree over there for shade. And then finally, treat attention with the respect it deserves. This means when you have their attention, you need to be prepared to use it, to use that to your advantage. So if you have ever met a toddler, it kind of goes something like this when they're trying to get your attention. They tap, 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 or pull on your sleeve, or hey, miss, or hey, mom, or whatever. And then you finally can pull your attention away from the important task that you're doing. And you look down and you say, what is it, honey? And they go, actually, hold on one second. And they run away. And you're like, what? I just spent all my effort on paying attention to you. And now you're totally unprepared for it. And it's really frustrating. And it also sets a tone of what I have to say isn't really that important. So before you ask for people's attention, be prepared with what you're going to say. Knowledge of your audience. I'm gonna give you guys a second to read that little comic there. So if this guide knew her audience a little bit better, she might have noticed that some of the audience members are not particularly thrilled with being with being put down like that, or being referred to as something that is less than. So just being aware of your audience's knowledge level but also their needs in a way. So knowing whether your audience is a group of master naturalists versus a family group, right, with kids, or an older group. So a group of seniors come out. We need to know this so we can understand their knowledge level. And a great way to do this, you may not know this beforehand, but a great way to do this is just to ask questions when you're kind of walking along the trail. You kind of get to know them. Or instead of giving them information, this is another great thing that we can do is ask questions. So, hey, can anybody tell me what kind of tree makes acorns? And half the time you're going to get kids are like, acorn trees. So, just understanding where they're at in their knowledge level is great. Recognize this last point here. Recognize when to let visitors interact with the area on their own and not force interpretation on them. This is a big one. I've been on not just hikes, but like museum guided tours when you're like, I really want to go look at this part of the castle and imagine myself living there like a Disney princess. Can you stop talking for a minute? You get that feeling of like, can you just let me experience it a little bit? I just don't want to hear your voice right now. You're great, but I don't want to hear your voice 100% of the time. So just being aware that there are times you don't have to be saying anything at all. When you first get started taking these hikes or leading these hikes, sometimes you get the feeling like you need to be saying something all the time. And you guys, I don't want you to feel like that. Quickly on this here, I want to say something else about kind of the audience skill level or knowledge level. Don't assume the audience knowledge level. So I would avoid saying things like, as you know, or I'm sure you all know. It goes back to what I was saying earlier about when you say something like, raise your hand if you don't know what that is. It calls people out and it makes people feel uncomfortable. So no need to say those things. Don't have to point out, I'm assuming you all know this, because it's just kind of a little rude. So don't assume that they know or that they don't know something. And it's kind of a tricky line to cross or to balance on. And I'm making it more complicated than it is. You'll feel that as you go along. All right. A note about disabilities, and this is not necessarily going to be put on you guys, but effectively meeting the needs of visitors with disabilities is not only a legal mandate, it is a moral responsibility. And I told you guys earlier that I'm not a PowerPoint slide reader, but I feel like I have to read that slide out loud because it is so important for us to meet the needs of anybody who wants to be able to come on these hikes, but we understand that there are limitations. This is not a wheelchair-friendly trail. It's not. And it probably won't ever be, but we have to be aware of other disabilities that people might have. So maybe there are people who just walk slowly, or there are people who maybe have hearing issues. That's another disability that we need to be aware of. So you may not know, right? I mean, you're not going to ask, does anybody have any disabilities? That's illegal. We can't do that. But if anybody presents to you a disability that they have, being cognizant of it and doing your best to adapt to them is really important for, again, that sense of belonging and making sure that people feel that they know that they're important to this area, to the hike, and that they have something to contribute as well. So we can modify things to a certain extent. So things like your the voice level that you have, the words that you use can be more clear or less clear. So we'll talk more about that here in just a minute. Techniques. Okay, so a few words about techniques and things that you might do to engage. And remember, going back to our erotic acronym, ways that you might fulfill that erotic acronym. So activities or demonstrations, so doing things and getting, not just demonstrating something for the audience, which is something that you could do, but also getting them to demonstrate something for you as well, excuse me. Analogy, metaphor, simile. So comparing things to things that they might already know. Again, making it relevant to them by reaching across that bridge and bridging that gap from something they may be unfamiliar with something that they are familiar with. A story, maybe you have a story. And stories, if you're not a storyteller, I know that I'm not always the best storyteller. I kind of take a winding path in stories. So when I have a story I know that I'm going to want to tell, I practice it a lot, like probably too much. Actually, that's not a thing. I practice it a lot and it's great. Discussion. So again, this is kind of a back and forth. This is not you talking all the time. This is an active participation discussion. And then lastly, I've mentioned this before, I'm going to reiterate it again, questions. Asking questions gets people into that discussion. You do end up with a lot of little rabbit trails that you go off on, but it definitely helps you to learn more things, and it also gets them involved and helps your audience feel like they're a part of it. A few things that you might have on hand. So I talked earlier about kind of having things prepared, touch-wise, is field guides. And when I say field guides, it doesn't have to be paper. I have field guides on my phone, like the Audubon app, love it, use it all the time. And it's something that's accessible to people outside of the trail as well. So when they go home, they're like, hey, yeah, she used this Audubon app and I really liked it. And it seemed really easy to use. So I'm going to download it on my phone. And then they can learn more about the birds in their neighborhood. Binoculars, maybe you have them, maybe you don't. Harwood has a set of binoculars that you are welcome to borrow. Just let me know if you're taking a hike and you would like a set of binoculars to take with you. Hand lenses, thermometers, maybe, I don't know, meter stick or tape measure, string. String is great for like measuring trees around. And it's fun. There's a fun activity where you can like measure a tree around, and the biggest tree that you can find, you know, as you're walking along, we're like, okay, we have a goal. We're going to try to find a really big tree. And you find the biggest tree, you tie the string around, and then you unravel it and see how many people big it is. Tree cross sections, you may or may not have those. You'll see some fallen logs, so you can see the inside of the tree along the trail. Mounted photos, drawings, small flannel board. Don't worry about that kind of stuff for hiking. But maybe you have like an actual illustration, again, kind of going back to that paper field guide kind of thing, maps, compass, that's all up to kind of your comfort level. It's not necessary. The trails are very well marked. Hopefully you won't get lost. And then an app on your phone for playing birds. That kind of goes with our field guides. That being said, don't bring too much stuff, because stuff distracts from the real presentation or what they need to be looking at. So looking through binoculars is great, but if the binoculars themselves are distracting for actually looking at birds, then we don't need them, right? We can hear the birds, we can identify them by their calls. There are lots of other ways that we can experience things without stuff. Most of the time, the stuff that I bring, I might have a magnifying glass and I may never use it. I have a backpack, I just have like Band-Aids and stuff in there and emergency peanut butter and water. But beyond that, I typically, for me, I tend to kind of stay away from extra stuff. Besides my little apps on my phone for birding. Handling complications. Before I do this, do you guys have any other questions or comments? All right, so handling complications. I really like this picture that I used in the background, because it highlights the fact that there's no such thing as bad weather, just being unprepared for it, right? So there, like I said earlier, there are some hairy parts of this trail that do get, when it gets wet, they stay wet for a while. It's near the creek, right? So being prepared for that is really important, but it's not just being prepared for rain or whatever. It can be, like I talked about earlier, speaking skills. And this goes back to talking about like our disabilities and even people who don't have disabilities, but just being aware of your speaking skills is really important. So to start off at the top here, your volume. make sure you're speaking loud enough that people can hear you. Some of this stuff hopefully is pretty obvious, but me saying it out loud hopefully kind of sparks that in your brain a little bit. The rate. I know I talk really fast. It works fine for kids. Sometimes adults are like, hold up, I need you to repeat that slowly. I understand that. And I consciously try to slow down when necessary, but I just get really excited. Sorry, I'm not sorry. It's exciting. The pitch. So some people have a hard time hearing pitches that are too low or too high. So being aware of that kind of, helps us out a little bit. Try to be in mid-range, not asking you guys to be like in the choir, but speak at a pitch that is audible by everybody. Articulation. This is important for like when we're trying to reach the back of the class, and when we mumble our words, this goes along with like pitch. When we mumble our words, it's inaudible, right? Even if you're clearly saying something, the person up front can hear you, the person in the back is going to have no idea what you're saying. So be articulate. Pronunciation. Pronouncing your words properly not only gives you credibility, but also makes it easier for people to understand. This is especially true for people who maybe English is not their first language. So be aware of that. When I was growing up, somebody told me at one point to wash something, and it was the first time I'd ever heard that. And I had no idea what she was talking about. And I stood there with my hands empty, just waiting for somebody else to tell me what to do, because I didn't even know how to ask what that meant. And then somebody else was like, you need to go wash. You need to go wash this. I was like, oh, wash. I never would have figured that out for some reason. So being aware of your accent, maybe if you have an accent, can be important. And I'm not saying get rid of your accent. That can be really tough, but being aware of it can help you maybe reiterate something, or if you say a word that you have trouble saying clearly, you can define it to make sure everyone's on the same page of what you said. Making eye contact. This is important for again, making people feel like they belong and that they're important. The last point is a big one too. Repeating questions so everyone can hear, because there may be somebody up front who asked a question, and then if you don't repeat the question, you just answer it. The people in the back are like, well, that's a really interesting thing, but I have no idea what it pertains to. So when you repeat the question, even if you think everybody can hear, there may be somebody who couldn't hear, but they're too shy to tell you they couldn't hear the question. So just repeat the question. All right. Unhappy hikers. Hopefully this does not happen. I don't think I've had a situation where I've really had to deal with somebody who was super unhappy about it, but because they all want to be there, right? But you may get people who, I don't know, who just decide they're not having a good time. So here's a good method to go through. We like acronyms, right? So our laugh method is a really good kind of step-by-step on how to deal with this. First thing is listening without interrupting. This is important. If you've ever been to relationship counseling, maybe this will pertain to that kind of stuff too. Acknowledge their plight by kind of repeating back to them, I understand it is hot. It helps them feel heard, right? Understanding, so showing that you get it if you need to ask questions to clarify. If like there's a hiker that's like, it's too hot, I'm too cold. That happens surprisingly a lot in Texas when I'm on a hike in the fall or early spring. It's too cold. I can't even feel my feet. Okay, I get it. It's so cold. Have you ever experienced a time when you were colder than this? What did you do to feel warmer? That kind of stuff. Kind of helping them not only get out of the funk and not think about it, but also, again, showing you understand them. Give solutions. This means avoiding excuses and avoiding blaming somebody or something else. Yes, I understand that it is cold. I am also cold, but we are almost 30 minutes away from your car where you're going to get warm and you get to go home and you get to snuggle under a blanket and have hot chocolate. Sometimes it's great if you have something to help kind of mitigate the complaints that you know you might get. It is hot. So I have an extra bottle of water that I froze last night, brought with me. So if you need just something to stick on your forehead, I have a frozen bottle of water for you guys. Sometimes in the winter, I'll carry a blanket in my backpack, just in case. And then hit home. Make sure that the outcome is 100% satisfactory. You know for sure that they're safe and that they feel like the situation has been resolved, right? And make sure that that situation has been resolved. All right. Resources. I sent you guys a few of these earlier, a couple weeks ago. I think Ken asked about them. Just things that you guys can do to learn a little bit more and practice a little bit more and get a few more tips and tricks on leading stuff. Beabetterguide.com. They have great resources. They also have great YouTube videos, certified interpretive guide trainings. Again, if you want to do that, it is usually a 3 or 3.5 days. It's a good 3-day training. And it's usually in person. I'm not sure if they're still offering virtual. I did mine virtually, but you can find out more information there on interp.net.com. And the North American Association for Environmental Education, they have some good resources in terms of like activities you might want to do with younger kids to help you feel more comfortable and being prepared. And on YouTube, just YouTube, how to be a hike leader, how to be a guide. And there are lots of great resources that come up there. Okay, for this specific hike, our Lake Creek hike, contact information is for Glenn Buckley, and he's here. Your video on. Yeah, so Glenn is here. Here's his contact information. He's been on the emails as well that I've sent out. So you may be able to kind of reply to him there. If you have any questions, he's going to be the one kind of setting up these hikes. The idea is to start these in January. Officially, we may have kind of a few hikes between now and then set up. Not quite sure yet, but between now and January, the plan is to kind of advertise the hikes and get people interested and excited about them. This means that you guys have between now and January to practice. And this is a skill, right? Interpretation is a skill. It's not something that you're just born knowing how to do, or you either do or you don't. It's something that you practice and you get better at. So you don't have to have a group of hikers to practice this. Every time I take my dog on a walk, I practice things that, oh, I really like this tree. I wonder what it is. I want to learn more about it so that next time, if I'm with a group of hikers or even like my dad on a trail, I can point out to him that this is a sarsaparilla plant and it's what makes root beer. And it's kind of just like a cool little thing to know, right? Walk with family or friends or neighbors. And practice these things. It doesn't have to be a full, complete hike, but as you're walking, you may choose to point out something that you find interesting or draw their attention to a bee that you noticed. A lot of this is really just about being aware and helping others to be aware of the stuff around them. Let's see. Remember, this is not a museum, so when you are practicing, make sure that you're not just giving facts, right? This is a big takeaway I want you guys to remember from this presentation. You're not just giving people facts about stuff. You are a human. You are going to interpret nature in a humanly way with feelings and emotions. We want people to connect with nature emotionally so that they feel connected to it, they feel responsible for it, and they then might take action to help take care of it. They may want to become a volunteer that comes clean up the trails on a weekend or something like that. And remember, not once did I tell you during this presentation exactly what you have to say in terms of content. You don't have to say certain types of trees. You don't have to know everything there is to know about the butterflies or the lizards or whatever you're going to see out there. You don't have to know all that stuff. The feeling that you're giving people is what's important. Your passion, your excitement for the outdoors is what you're giving to people, the biggest thing. All right, so I'm going to bring up this website really quickly. Let me do a little new share here. And I'm going to show you guys what this website looks like. So there are a few kind of resources here that I think would be really helpful. Oh, I just realized we're a little bit over time, or we're a little over 8. I'm not sure if I said we're doing an hour and a half. Hopefully we're all good on time here. If you need to go, that's fine. This is recorded and I'll send it to you guys later. But here on, we after this, we do have one more thing to do. So here on the lakecreektx.org website, we have, if you go to the preserve and trail information, click Montgomery County Lake Creek Preserve, and it will come up with this other page that has a few resources here. So there's the trail map. There's also, I'm not going to pull all these up. There's soils, if you're interested in kind of talking about soils that are there. One thing I think you guys are really going to enjoy. So these two pages here on the bottom, the preserve flora and fauna. This is just a list of stuff that's there. So maybe it's helpful, maybe it's not, but just kind of things that you might be prepared to see. I'm gonna go back. This trail guide though might be really great if you're like not so comfortable with trees, for example. On the trail, there are, kind of come down here. There, you see all these little numbers here. So there are marked signs next to a lot of like mostly plants, and you can, it'll tell you what it is. And in this little guide, it tells you a little bit about that plant or whatever it is. So our tupelo, and you guys can read through this. I'm not going to go all the way through this. Willow oak. So you can kind of familiarize yourself with some of the background information on the things you might see. So just a few kind of handy little things to keep in mind from this website. All right, let's go back here. All right. Can you guys see my PowerPoint? Did I do that correctly? Good deal. Okay, let me pause here. Do you guys have any questions or comments before we move on?
Yeah, how many guides go with each group?
There will be one guide per group, but the groups will be on the smaller side, thinking no more than probably 10 to 15 people probably per group. That's a good question. Glad you asked. Anything else you guys think of?
Yeah, and the hikes, well, you said kind of be targeted at a certain group, like one, whatever, however often, like for kids, or another time might be for teenagers, another time for Texas Master Naturals. Will there be like a kind of like a stated intent for each hike?
I think, Glenn, you may be able to, or Brenda, you guys may be able to give more insight on this. But I think that right now the target audience will be just kind of family in the community. So Wood Forest is, if you see kind of around here, this area is developed. There are neighborhoods around here that are full of families that would really enjoy these hikes. And I think that's going to be kind of our main focus for now. There certainly, I'm sure at some point will be some hikes that are targeted for certain age groups, including a Master Naturalist hike as well. So yeah, Glenn, Brenda, do you have anything else to add to that?
No, you nailed it. That's pretty much, I think, what we're thinking right now. It's just basically right now, I think our thing is trying to get the word out. And I'm working with a few people, and I know Glenn's doing a few things. And yeah, I think exactly you pretty much summed it up. You're great. What we're at. This is work in progress, you guys. You'll have to be patient with us, but it's going to be great when it's done. So, and y'all are all in the, what do we call this when we're all like the pioneers, I guess? This is the pioneer program, right?
Guinea pigs. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Anything else before we move on? We're going to do a game. Okay. All right. If you guys think of anything else, let me know. We are going to play a game. that I call Rate a Hike. So I'm going to give you guys a few scenarios. I think there are 5, if I'm not mistaken, scenarios where it's just a picture. Obviously, we're not getting the complete hike, but it's just like a little snapshot. And there's going to be some text on there. And I understand sometimes it may look a little bit small. Like Carolyn, I know you're on the iPad. So I'm going to read the text out to you guys. And what I want you guys to do is rate the experience that you're having of this little snapshot of the hike from 1 to 10. 1 being, this is terrible, I'm miserable on this hike, to 10 being, this is fantastic, I would love to do this hike again. Just based on feelings. All right. So starting with this lady, I'm assuming the lady in the middle with the camera around her neck is our hike leader. And she's standing there saying, when we stand here on the trail, we're imitating some of the earliest colonial settlers of the American West. Stephen F. Austin stood on this exact spot and overlooked this same landscape, but it looked very different than it does now. Would you believe me if I told you there are more trees here now than there were in the late 1800s? Why do you think the landscape has changed so drastically? So type in the chat, what number between 1 and 10? From 1 to 10, what number would you give it? Linda says 5. Ruth says 3. Okay, 5. Some of you guys are like, not so sure. Carolyn Longanay says 9. We got a 6 and a 5. Some of you guys are kind of in the middle, not really sure where to put this lady. So I want to hear some reasons, and you guys can unmute to give your reasons or type in the chat. Why do you feel the way you do about this? Why did you give it a 5 or a 9 or a 3? Ruth, I know you gave it a 3. What do you
Yeah, I just felt like it was a lot of information leading up to a question, and I just felt like if it was me, I'd still be like, wait a minute, Stephen Austin, colonial settlers, trees. I don't know, maybe my brain just doesn't work fast enough, but
okay. Carolyn Longlanay says she likes the questions at the end, that they're relating to history, but the sun is in their eyes. So that was a big thing we talked about earlier, is kind of being aware of your surroundings. So kind of some mixed stuff. Who said this one? It's a history lesson, so it does engage with the question at the end, right? Linda, she does ask some questions. She does give some information, and then ask some questions on how they feel about it, gets them to interact with it. For me, I would probably say 7 or 8. I think this is on the higher end. I think she's doing a great job. All right, this guy, I'm assuming the hike leader is guy on the right, and he says, you probably know what kind of tree this is. If you don't, then I bet you're not from around here. This is an ash juniper, also known as an eastern red cedar. It has needle-like leaves. The female junipers have little blue berries. If you put these berries in vodka, you can make gin. How do you feel about this guy? Right off the bat, he's insulting the group. So a 4, says Linda. Brenda says 0. Got some 3s there. Talking down to them for sure. Don't like that. But I will say this little tidbit at the end of putting juniper berries in vodka and making gin, that's one way that I engage adults on the hike that's typically meant for kids. It tells them that, hey, this hike is also for you. I'm going to be giving you some cool information, so you should be listening. But I definitely would not present it this way, right? I definitely would not be like, oh, you either know this tree or you're dumb, because that's the feeling that you get from this guy, right? Lost me from not around here, but drew me back with gin. Yeah. All right, so some good things and some bad things. All right, so this guy here, he's holding up some sort of fungi, and he says, remember our #1 rule of mushroom hunting? That's right, never touch it unless you're 100% sure that you know what it is. This one I know is safe to touch, and we can pass it around in a minute. As you hold this fungi fruit, I want you to pay close attention to the gills on the underside. Tell me, what do you notice about how it looks and feels compared to the one we saw earlier? We got a couple of 10s already. Everyone's gonna give this guy a 10. Okay, so what are the good things that this guy's doing? Informative and confident. Yes, that's very important when we're looking at fungi. We have to for sure know what it is. Engaging, love it, Brenda. So he's engaging them with their senses. He's saying, look at it, feel it. He wants to ask questions about kind of the comparison of things that they've already experienced before. He stated the answer in his speech, elaborated, asked questions. That's right. So he's using kind of, I would say in some ways, technical words, technical vocabulary, but he's using it in a way that makes sure that everybody understands it. And obviously there was something that went on earlier in the hike. So hopefully he's kind of given some background information on what fungi is and what the rules are for safety, right? We can kind of context clues, get that from this guy. Okay. Like Terry MacArthur teaches. Yeah. I have yet to take one of her mycology excursions, but I need to do that. All right, so the lady in the blue in the hat, she's pointing at the sign. I'm assuming that she's the one leading this hike. Bunch of kids here. She says, the bird you see on this sign is called Cyanocita cristata. It's a very pretty bird. Have you ever seen one before? Now pay attention because it's going to take about 10 minutes to read this sign to you. I'm assuming she's going to take 10 minutes to read the sign. What do you guys think about that? Carolyn says 1. Brenda, 1. Yikes, reading the sign. 0 from Lisa. Really sticking it to this lady here. No common name, scientific only, probably not great for a group of kids, right? And then 10 minutes to read the sign. That sounds pretty dull. I don't think these kids are really gonna be into it. Can anybody for bonus points, for fake bonus points, anybody know what Cyanocita cristata is? What kind of bird that is? Think about the word cyan in there is one of the colors you might find in a, you're on the right track, Carolyn. Bluebird, it is gonna be something that's blue, that looks blue, but it's not a bluebird. Why would it take so long to read? Yeah, sometimes when you go to hikes, Brenda, it's a blue jay. Yeah, sometimes when I go to hikes, they're like on trails, there are signs with a lot of information on them. And I never read all of it. I'm gonna pick out like a little bit of information and take that with me and then continue on. Especially like if I have my dog and I'm walking my dog on the trail, I'm not gonna stand there for 10 minutes and read this thing. And I'm certainly not interested in staying there for 10 minutes and listening to somebody read it to me. That sounds kind of miserable. On the plus side, though, so we've talked about this lady quite a bit. Can you guys give me some positive things about this interpretation? I need to give more credit to Brenda. Brenda, you did a good job. It was a blue jay. And I bet you did that without even looking it up. Any positives you guys see from this guy? Nobody has the sun in their eyes. Yeah, that's for sure. Seem to be pretty comfortable here. Anything else? I like she's asking the questions. Yeah, Chris, she's asking the question. She's pointing and directing the kids. So there's definitely some positives here, and there's positives and negatives about everything. But yeah, overall, I would say on the negative side for this lady. Okay, I have one more here. The guy on the right, I'm assuming, is our hike leader. And he says, I want to pause here and give you some time to take in this breathtaking view. Believe it or not, this is the site of an important battle during the Mexican-American War. Do you think the soldiers ever stopped and appreciated the beauty of these limestone hills? What do you guys think about this guy? Carolyn says 10, Brenda says 8. 8, 7. It's on the higher side. So 10 stopped and let them be immersed, shared his passion, definitely seems to be interested in kind of the history behind it. I like that. So you guys obviously think very positively about this, right? Are there any negatives that you see here? It's okay if there aren't, but just kind of balancing it out here. Are there any things that you might do differently? Maybe not. Kind of like this guy. I kind of like this one. Yeah, I don't know that I would do anything differently here. I would, if I were to bring up something like the Mexican-American War and I would to point that out, I would probably want to know what the name of the battle was because somebody's going to ask and I want to need to know. So if I'm going to bring up something like that, I would want to know that kind of fact. but hopefully, I'm assuming this guy does.
I kind of wondered what the purpose of the question was, though. Do you think the soldiers ever stopped and appreciated the beauty of these limestone hills?
I would think it's probably a rhetorical question. Maybe while he says in the beginning, I want you to pause and take some time to take in the view. And he's probably kind of stepping back and letting them do it. Maybe this is not all in one go. And while they're kind of appreciating it and looking around and pointing at things, and they're like, wow, this is great. He just brings up, do you ever think the soldiers stopped and appreciated the beauty here? Like, do you think about like the soldiers? So yeah, it depends on how you would say it, for sure. Just giving something to reflect on, right, Linda? Yeah, good. So yeah, there are definitely different styles, right? I think all these different people had different styles of teaching, and your style is your own. You're not going to teach the same way that I do. You're not going to lead a hike the same way I do. But hopefully you guys get excited about it, and you guys have passion. Obviously, you guys are here. You guys are excited about this. You guys have a passion for leading people on hikes and showing people this kind of stuff. So the thing that we need to do now is for you guys to figure out a way to translate that. And that's what we're going to do a little bit more on Saturday on our hike. And it appears the weather will be amazing. So I said, I'm going to like eat my shoe here. I said that the weather was maybe not going to be great, but it is. So maybe I'll just say that more often. Weather's not going to be great. All right. So that wraps it up for me. My contact information, you guys should all have it, but I'm also putting my phone number here. I'm going to email this to you guys again later, along with the recording of this video and the PDF of the slides and stuff. Because on Saturday, if you need to get in contact with me, don't email me. I'm not going to look at it. But if you call me or text me, I will respond more easily. So let me come out of here so you can see my beautiful face. And do you guys have any questions? Again, to kind of wrap this up, I will send you the recording of this. I'm going to send you the PDF of the PowerPoint that I have. I'm also going to send you extra information for our hike on Saturday. It does not look like it's going to be super wet out there, but be prepared for wet shoes. You know, don't bring your unicorn shoes. Bring shoes that you don't mind getting a little dirty. No need to bring anything crazy. Like, you don't have to bring your own hand lenses or magnifying glasses or anything. If you don't want to, I'll be leading the hike for the most of the time, but I'm going to ask you guys to practice a little bit while we're there. There's also, okay, so the 2978, you're talking about Fish Creek, is that what we were talking about? So on Fish Creek, when you're coming, if you're coming north on Fish Creek, it's going to be on the east side. It's going to be on your right side. And it's easy to kind of get there from going north on Fish Creek from 1488 north. However, if you're coming south on Fish Creek, you got to take a little U-turn, and there really isn't very good signage for where to turn. It's right after the light. Does anybody know what light that is? I think it's in my PowerPoint here somewhere. You know what I'm talking about? Brenda or Glenn?
Yeah, I think go ahead. If you're coming from the north, there are two ways you can do it. One, if you stay on Fish Creek Thoroughfare, you cross the bridge and then turn around after you cross the bridge and come back from the south. There's no way to cross over right at the entrance. The other thing you can do is to turn at the light, turn left going south, and go to Christine Allen Park and park in the Christine Allen Park parking lot and walk across the little footbridge and come to the southwest corner of that park. That'll be the northeast entrance to the reserve. Or you can just walk down the road. You'll meet us at the second trailhead. There are two trailheads, one at the northeast corner, one in the central at the north end. The one we're going to meet at would be at the center, the central trailhead.
Yeah, so there's the trailhead that I'm talking about that we will meet at is going to be On the map, it's listed as Lake Creek Preserve hiking entrance. So I sent that to you guys, right? So I'll send it to you guys again, just the link to the point on the map where that's going to be. It's just south of Wood Forest Parkway South. That's the light that we're talking about, trying to get around. So again, if you have any issues, let me know. It is a bumpy gravel road. So take it slow coming in the entrance. You will see, I have a little red Prius. You're going to see my car parked at the trail entrance, and that's about where we'll meet. There's some little picnic tables there, so you guys feel free to kind of like chill out. I always walk the trail before I give a hike. And I'm very familiar with this trail, but I'm glad you guys are doing this with me. But if you are going to be leading a hike in January and you don't go there between now and then, I would recommend getting there before your hike group does and taking a loop, just knowing what's there. Also, face full of spiders before any of the kids have to deal with it, you know? So, okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
I might make one comment. We just did a maintenance day last weekend, so the trails are in real good shape. Unless we get some rain, it should be pretty dry.
I don't think we're supposed to have rain.
I don't think so either.
So,
But you never know in Texas.
yeah. Yeah, it says clear. So this cool front coming in. Oh, it's so nice. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. Okay. No, yeah, it's gonna be great. Okay, anything else, Brenda, Glenn, you need to add about this, or any other questions that you guys have about Saturday Nature?
No, I like the idea of focusing on the feelings, because my wife and I actually spend Easter mornings down there at the pond, and it's really nice. And a nice cool day, early morning, you hear the frogs, the birds.
Yeah,
Get a different feeling.
it's so nice out there. I'm excited. So again, I'll email you guys. It'll have my phone number in there. I'll email you the map to how to get there. Again, there are no restrooms there on site, so be prepared for that. Yeah, if you guys don't have anything else, that's all I have for you guys. I'll email you guys the link
One thing,
a little bit.
yeah, one thing I might mention on restrooms. Right now, we won't have restrooms, but if this thing takes off, like I'm hoping it does, I can get some money, I think, to have a restroom once a month on our hike day. So we just need to pick the time of month we're going to do it on a regular basis, and we'll rent a restroom to have there.
Great. That's great. Yeah, I'll be parked next to the shipping container. Yeah. Thanks, Brenda. What was I gonna say? Yeah. So, it may take a little bit for the recording to save, where I can share the link with you guys to view it later. So you won't get an email from me immediately. It'll be a little while. May not be until tomorrow morning, but I'll get it to you guys. All right. Thank you guys so much for coming. Yes, if you're logging hours, you get an hour and a half of AT it's logged under single presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Your description is going to be Adrienne was amazing. And I'll do this again. Yeah. No.
You're
Thank
amazing.
you.
I flatter
Thank you,
myself.
Bye.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Adrienne.
Saturday.
Bye.
Yes.